They called her worthless and sold her as if she had no value. But a solitary Native American father of 3 chose her in front of everyone. The reason behind this unexpected choice will break your heart. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The suffocating heat of Phoenix seemed to intensify. With every mile, Amber Taylor moved away from the city. The chartered bus swayed on the dirt road, raising a cloud of red dust that stuck to the passenger's sweaty skin. She clutched the small backpack containing all her worldly possessions to her chest, trying to ignore the curious glances from the other occupants of the vehicle. Everyone knew where she was going. Everyone knew why. The Mitchell mining ranch stretched for thousands of acres on the border between Arizona and New Mexico, a property that had existed for decades in a gray area between legality and unbridled exploitation. Amber had grown up hearing whispered stories about that place, how entire families disappeared when they went against the owner's interests, how young women were hired for services that went far beyond mining, how the very desert seemed to die around those devastated lands. But now she had no choice. Her father, Jack Taylor, had accumulated an unpayable debt with Richard Mitchell after losing everything in illegal gambling. The proposal had been clear. Amber would work on the ranch for 2 years and the debt would be paid. The alternative was to see the entire family disappear one night, as so many others had already disappeared. Amber closed her eyes and tried to block out the memory of her last conversation with her father. His hands were shaking when he pushed her onto the bus, his eyes red from whiskey and remorse. "It's just for a while, girl," he had mumbled, unable to look her in the eye. "Then you'll come back home." But they both knew that was a lie. No one returned from Mitchell lands the same way they had arrived. The bus finally stopped in a clearing where an iron gate stood with the mining company's symbol, an eagle with outstretched wings holding a pickaxe. Amber got off along with 5 other passengers, all young, all with the same expression of bitter resignation on their faces. A short, stocky man approached, checking names on a dirty clipboard. Amber Taylor. His voice was harsh, laden with cigarettes and authority. "That's me. Welcome to Golden Eagle Ranch. I'm Sanders, the foreman. Your first few weeks will be in the main house, helping with cooking and cleaning. Then we'll see where you fit best." The malicious smile that accompanied these words made Amber's stomach turn. They were led down a narrow road that cut through a desolate landscape. The desert around had been devastated by fires and mining, leaving only charred stumps and craters in the red earth. The air smelled of smoke, sulfur, and something indefinable that reminded her of death. Amber had never seen destruction on such a scale, and for a moment she wondered if she hadn't fallen into some kind of hell on earth. The main house was an imposing 2-story structure, all dark wood and wrought iron, surrounded by gardens that tried to disguise the devastation around it. Amber and the others were taken to the back, where the workers' accommodations were located. Small, stuffy rooms with iron bunk beds and bedding that had seen better days. "Rest today," said Sanders. "Work starts early tomorrow, and remember, in here the boss's word is law. If you don't like the rules, you can try your luck out there in the desert, but I wouldn't recommend it." The laugh that followed these words echoed through the corridors like an omen. Amber spent the first night awake, listening to the strange sounds that came from the desert. Distant roars that didn't seem to come from known animals, screams that could be human or not, and a constant drumming that seemed to come from all directions at once. When she finally managed to fall asleep, her dreams were populated by shadowy figures dancing around bonfires, speaking in languages she didn't understand, but somehow made sense. The next morning, she was awakened before dawn by an older woman named Nancy, who had been working in the kitchen for more than 10 years. Nancy's face was marked by a hard life, but her eyes still held a spark of genuine kindness. "Listen well, girl," she said as she handed Amber a worn apron. "You have 2 types of people here, those who bend and those who break. If you want to survive, you need to learn to be invisible when necessary and strong when you have no other option." The work in the kitchen was hard, but Amber soon discovered that it was one of the safest places on the ranch. There she could observe without being noticed Listen to conversations that revealed the true business that drove that place. It wasn't just mining. There was illegal timber trafficking, smuggling of precious stones, and something darker that involved Native American lands in the region. It was during one of these listening sessions that she first heard the name Hunter Blackhawk. The men spoke of him in whispers, even there in the main house far from the Native American lands. They said he was the son of an American military man and a Navajo medicine woman, that he had grown up between two worlds without fully belonging to either, that he led a silent resistance against the invasion of his people's lands, using methods ranging from diplomacy to tactics that made invaders disappear without a trace. His problem, Amber heard Richard Mitchell say to his henchmen on a particularly hot afternoon, is that he knows both sides. He speaks our language, understands our laws, but has a native heart. He's too dangerous to leave loose. Why don't we send some men to solve the problem? Suggested one of the henchmen. Richard's laugh was dry and bitter. You don't understand, do you? We've tried 3 times. The men simply disappeared. The desert swallowed them as if they'd never existed. This hunter isn't an ordinary native. They say his mother was one of the most powerful healers in the region before she died, that she passed secrets to him that we can't even imagine. Amber felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in those conversations that awakened a dormant memory, a connection she couldn't explain. At night, lying in her uncomfortable bunk, she remembered Grandma June, who had died when Amber was still a child. June had been a midwife and healer in the outskirts of Phoenix, known for her ability to heal with plants and prayers. She had Native American blood in her veins, something the family never openly talked about, but was evident in Amber's features and in the ancestral wisdom that sometimes sprang from her dreams. The routine on the ranch was quickly established. Amber woke before the sun, worked in the kitchen until noon, then was assigned other tasks that varied according to need, cleaning the main house, organizing documents in the office, or sometimes helping attend to the special visitors who arrived in private helicopters to do business with Richard. It was during one of these occasions that she saw the maps for the first time. She was organizing papers in the office when she came across detailed plans of the region, marked with symbols she didn't recognize but somehow made sense. They were Native American territories that she knew, but there were other markings, access routes, clandestine mining points, and something that made her heart race, references to sacred sites and archaeological sites. Amber discreetly photographed some of the maps with the old cell phone she had managed to hide from the supervisors. She didn't know exactly why she was doing this. She just felt that this information was important, that it could make a difference for someone, maybe for the native communities themselves that were being invaded. The opportunity to act came 2 weeks later, when Sanders announced that she would be part of a group taking supplies to one of the more remote mining camps. It was a 3-day journey through the desert, in territories that were technically protected, but had for years served as areas for illegal exploitation. It's a promotion, said Sanders, with that smile that never reached his eyes. Shows that we trust you. But remember, what you see out there stays out there. Those who talk too much don't come back to tell the story. The group was small. Besides Amber, there were 2 drivers, a mining technician, and an armed guard. They set off before dawn in 2 vehicles adapted for the difficult terrain, following trails that seemed to have been recently opened in the dense brush. During the journey, Amber could see up close the extent of the destruction. Rivers contaminated by mercury, entire areas of desert scraped bare, dead animals floating in pools of polluted water. It was like crossing a war zone where nature had lost the battle. On the 2nd day, when they were deep in the desert, the EO group was forced to stop. A huge tree had fallen in the middle of the trail, completely blocking the passage. While the men discussed how to get around the obstacle, Amber noticed something strange. The tree had been felled with surgical precision, and there were marks on the bark that seemed intentional. This was no accident, muttered the technician, examining the trunk. Someone cut down this tree on purpose. That's when they appeared. Silent as shadows, they emerged from the dense brush in a perfect circle around the group. There were 5 men, all with striking Native American features, wearing clothes that mixed traditional elements with modern jungle equipment. They didn't carry firearms, only bows, spears, and machetes, but there was something about their presence that was infinitely more intimidating than any gun. The ranch guard tried to draw his weapon, but before he could complete the movement, a spear flew through the air and hit the pistol's handle squarely, tearing it from his hand. He screamed in pain and surprise, holding his injured fingers. "Nobody moves," said a voice in perfectly articulated English. "You are in protected territory, committing crimes against nature and against my people." Amber looked up and felt as if the world had stopped spinning. The man who had spoken was tall and athletic, with features that mixed Native American and European characteristics in a way that resulted in an almost supernatural beauty. His skin was tanned by the desert sun, his black hair fell over his shoulders in natural waves, and his eyes were a yellowish green that seemed to capture all the wild strength of the American Southwest. But it wasn't just his physical appearance that impressed her. There was a natural authority in the way he moved, a presence that commanded respect without needing shouts or threats. When his eyes met hers, Amber felt an electric current run through her entire body, an instant connection that left her breathless. "Hunter Blackhawk," she whispered without thinking, and saw genuine surprise in his eyes. "You know me?" "Only from hearsay." Her voice came out weaker than she intended. "My name is Amber." For a moment that seemed eternal. They looked at each other in silence. Amber felt as if he could see through her, as if he could see not only who she was, but who she could become. There was recognition in that look, as if they were old acquaintances meeting again after years of separation. The moment was broken when one of the drivers tried to run. Two of the native warriors moved with feline speed, intercepting him before he took 3 steps. He was brought back to the group, trembling with fear. "You have 2 options," said Hunter, without taking his eyes off Amber. "You can go back where you came from and tell your boss that this area is under our protection, or you can stay here forever, as part of the desert." His voice was calm, but there was a veiled threat that made all the ranchmen swallow hard. "We were just doing our job," said the technician with a trembling voice. "We don't want trouble with you." "Your job is to destroy our sacred land," replied Hunter. "That's trouble enough." Amber felt an inexplicable compulsion to speak. "I have information," she said, surprising herself with her own audacity, "about the ranch's plans, about the maps and routes they use." All eyes turned to her. The ranchmen stared at her with shock and fury, while Hunter studied her with renewed interest. "You're committing suicide, girl," hissed the guard. "Richard will kill you when he finds out about this." "Richard won't know anything if you don't." "Tell him," she replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. "And you won't tell because you know that if I don't come back, you'll be the ones who pay the price." It was a risky bluff, but it worked. The men fell silent, calculating their options. Amber took advantage of the moment of hesitation to address Hunter directly. "I need to talk to you, alone." He nodded almost imperceptibly and signaled to his men. Within minutes, the ranch group was led away, watched by the Native American warriors, while Hunter and Amber were left alone in the clearing. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, crossing his arms. "You don't know me. You owe nothing to my people. Why risk your life?" Amber hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Because what they're doing is wrong. Because my grandmother always told me that when you see injustice and do nothing, you become part of it." She paused, gathering courage. "And because ever since I heard about you, I feel that there's a connection, as if our paths were meant to cross." Hunter studied her for a long moment. "Your grandmother was June Taylor." The shock of hearing her grandmother's name made Amber stagger. "How did you—" "She died 15 years ago." "My mother spoke of her." Yvonne Blackhawk and June Taylor were friends, partners in many healing works. "When my mother was murdered by miners, your grandmother was one of the few people who came to the funeral, even knowing she was at risk." His eyes hardened with the memory. "She told me that day that our family had a debt to yours, that one day that debt would be collected." Amber felt her legs weaken. "I didn't know. She never told me." "There was a lot that the wise women didn't tell," said Hunter, moving closer to her. secrets that were passed on only when the right time came. Perhaps that time is now. They stood in silence, the air between them charged with tension and unspoken possibilities. Amber could feel the heat emanating from his body, could see the scars that marked his arms and chest, evidence of a life of struggle and survival. There was something primitive and powerful about him that awakened instincts she didn't even know she possessed. "I need to go back," she finally said, though every fiber of her being screamed to stay. "If I don't show up, they'll suspect, but I can bring more information. I can help." "It's dangerous," he said, but there was admiration in his voice. "If they find out? I'm already in danger just by being here. At least this way my presence can serve some purpose." Hunter nodded slowly. "There's a waterfall 3 miles north of the ranch. Crystal clear waters surrounded by white rocks. Can you find it?" "I think so. If you can get away from the ranch, meet me there in 3 days at dusk. Bring everything you can about their plans." He hesitated, then added, "And Amber, be careful. Richard Mitchell is more dangerous than you imagine. He's not just a miner. He has connections, protection in high places. If he suspects you're working against him—" "I know the risks," she interrupted, "but I can't keep pretending I don't. See what's happening?" Hunter moved closer until they were just inches apart. Amber could feel his breath on her face, could see the golden flecks in his green eyes. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and her heart raced in anticipation. Instead, he raised his hand and gently touched her face, a touch so gentle that it dramatically contrasted with the wild strength she felt emanating from him. "My mother used to say that some souls are born to find each other," he murmured, "that no matter how many obstacles the world puts in the way, they will always find a way to come together." "And do you believe that?" "I didn't," he said, keeping his hand on her face, "until today." The sound of voices approaching made them move apart quickly. The ranchmen were coming back, escorted by the Native American warriors. Amber composed herself, trying to appear normal, but felt as if every cell in her body was on fire. "Remember what I said," Hunter announced loudly. "This land is protected. Any new invasion will be treated as an act of war." The ranch group was released, but not before having their communication equipment confiscated. The return journey was tense and silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Amber knew she had crossed a point of no return, but for the first time, since she had arrived at the ranch, she felt she had a purpose. When they finally arrived back at Golden Eagle Ranch, it was already night. Sanders was waiting for them on the porch of the main house, clearly irritated by the delay and the failure of the mission. "So?" he asked harshly. "Did you deliver the supplies?" "We were intercepted by the natives," said the guard, still massaging his injured hand. "That Hunter Blackhawk and 4 others. They said the area is under their protection." Sanders spat on the ground. "Sons of bitches! The boss isn't going to like this at all." His eyes turned to Amber with suspicion. "And you, girl, didn't say anything you shouldn't have, right?" "I didn't even open my mouth," she lied without hesitation. "I just wanted to get out of there alive." Apparently satisfied, Sanders dismissed the group. Amber returned to her room, but knew she wouldn't be able to sleep. In 3 days, she would have to find a way to escape from the ranch and reach the waterfall. More importantly, she would have to get information valuable enough to justify the risk. During the next 2 days, she behaved like a model employee. She arrived early, worked in silence, didn't ask inconvenient questions. But she was constantly alert, looking for opportunities to access important documents or hear relevant conversations. The opportunity came on the night before the scheduled meeting. Richard had received a visit from a man in a suit who arrived in a military helicopter. Amber was serving dinner when she heard fragments of the conversation. "The natives are getting too bold," the visitor was saying. "The government is starting to put pressure because of international complaints." "Leave it to me," replied Richard. "I have a plan that will solve the Hunter Blackhawk problem once and for all, and as a bonus, we'll get full access to the lands." He's protecting. What kind of plan? The kind that leaves all problems buried deep in the desert where no one will ever find them. The laugh that followed these words made Amber's blood run cold. She needed to warn Hunter, but first she had to find a way to leave the ranch without arousing suspicion. The solution came from an unexpected source. Nancy, the older cook, approached her the next morning with a serious expression. "I need you to do something for me," she said in a low voice. "My sister lives in a nearby village. She's sick, needing medicine. Can you take it to her?" Amber felt her heart race. "But how will I get out of the ranch?" "Leave it to me. I've already talked to Sanders, said it's an emergency, that you're the only one who knows the way." Nancy looked at her, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. "Just don't take too long to come back. And if you meet someone you know on the way, well, sometimes the desert has its own plans for us." Amber understood that Nancy knew more than she let on. Perhaps she knew about the scheduled meeting. Perhaps she was just following an intuition. Either way, she was offering the cover that Amber needed. An hour before sunset, she left the ranch with a small backpack containing medicine, water, and the documents she had managed to photograph and print discreetly. Her heart was beating, so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but no one seemed to suspect anything. The walk to the waterfall was more difficult than she expected. The dense brush, the night sounds starting, the constant feeling of being watched. But when she finally reached her destination, when she saw the crystal-clear waters falling among the white rocks exactly as Hunter had described, she knew she was in the right place. He was already there, sitting on a rock on the edge of the small lagoon formed by the waterfall. He wore only dark fabric pants, leaving his torso exposed to the golden light of the late afternoon. Amber stopped for a moment, simply admiring the sight. There was something almost mythical about the way he harmonized with the landscape around him, as if he were an integral part of that piece of wild paradise. When he saw her, he rose in a fluid movement and went to meet her. They said nothing for a moment, just looked at each other, recognizing the change that had occurred in both of them since their last meeting. "Did you get the information?" he finally asked. "I did. But Hunter, there's something else. They're planning something against you, something terrible." And there, on the shores of that lost waterfall in the heart of the American Southwest, while the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Amber began to tell everything she had discovered, not knowing that that conversation would change not only their lives, but the fate of the entire region. The water from the waterfall reflected the first stars when Amber finished telling everything she had discovered. Hunter listened in silence, his face hardening with each new revelation. The maps, the invasion routes, Richard's plans, the visit from the man in the military suit, each piece of information was part of a sinister puzzle that was beginning to take shape. "Show me the documents," he said, extending his hand. Amber took the carefully folded sheets from her backpack, photographs printed in poor quality, but still legible. Hunter examined each one with attention, his expression becoming darker with each second. When he reached the last document, a detailed map showing locations marked as sites of archaeological interest, he let out a curse in Navajo that Amber didn't understand, but whose tone was unmistakable. "This map," he said, pointing to specific markings, "shows sacred sites of my people, places where our ancestors are buried, where we perform our most important rituals. If they gain access to these areas, what happens? It's not just the desecration. These sites are rich in rare minerals, stones that are worth fortunes on the international market. More importantly, they are areas of integral protection, and if they can prove there is no archaeological value, they can reclassify the lands and release them for mining." He folded the papers with contained strength. "Your boss is smarter than I thought." The sound of a branch breaking in the desert made them turn alert. Hunter moved instinctively in front of Amber, but it was just an anteater crossing the clearing, in search of water. Even so, the tension remained. "I need to take this information to the elders of the village," said Hunter. "They need to know what's happening." "And I need to get back before they miss me," Amber replied, though every fiber of her being screamed to stay. They looked at each other, both aware that that moment was coming to an end, but neither wanting to be the first to move away. The tension that had been between them since their first meeting seemed to intensify in the intimacy of that isolated place, away from the world's eyes. "Amber," Hunter said, moving closer, "what you're doing is dangerous. If they find out, I know the risks, she interrupted, raising her face to look him in the eyes. But I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening. And I can't pretend I don't feel what I'm feeling. The words came out before she could contain them. Honest. And raw like a confession. Hunter stood still for a moment, as if he were processing what he had heard. Then slowly he raised his hand and touched her face, repeating the gesture from their first meeting, but now with an intimacy that didn't exist before. My grandmother used to say that the heart recognizes what the mind doesn't yet understand, he murmured, his thumb tracing a soft line across her cheek. Since I saw you, I feel as if I've known you for a long time. Me too, she whispered, leaning into his touch. It's as if I were waking up from a very long dream. The distance between them gradually disappeared, until Amber could feel his warm breath against her skin, could see every detail of the green eyes that hypnotized her. When he finally lowered his head and their lips met, it was as if an electric spark ran through her entire body. The kiss started soft, almost hesitant, but quickly transformed into something more urgent, more desperate. Amber clung to his shoulders, feeling the tense muscles under her palm, while he pulled her closer, as if he wanted to merge their bodies into one. There was hunger in that kiss, but also tenderness, passion, mixed with something that seemed very much like reverence. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Hunter rested his forehead on hers, closing his eyes as if he were memorizing that moment. This complicates everything, he said, but it didn't sound like a complaint. I know, Amber replied, her hands still resting on his chest, feeling the accelerated beats of his heart. But I don't care. They stayed like that for a few more minutes, embraced in the growing dusk, listening to the sound of the waterfall and the night noises of the desert. It was a moment of peace amid the chaos their lives had become, an oasis of intimacy that both knew was temporary. I need to go, Amber finally said, though each word was agony. When can I see you again? I don't know. I'll try to find out more about their plans, but I need to be careful. She hesitated, then added, Hunter, they mentioned something about a specific plan against you, something that will solve the problem once and for all. You need to be careful. I always am, he said, but there was a new tension in his voice. You also need to promise that you'll take care of yourself. If something happens to me, you'll be in a very vulnerable position. Don't talk like that, she protested, grabbing his shirt. Nothing's going to happen. Amber, look at me. He held her face with both hands, forcing her to face him. If something goes wrong, if you feel in real danger, get away from the ranch. Don't try to be a hero, don't try to warn me, just disappear. Promise? I promise. The intensity in his gaze made her nod, even though she didn't intend to keep the promise. I promise. Hunter kissed her once more, a long and deep kiss that tasted of farewell. Then he watched her move away along the trail, disappearing among the trees like a shadow. Only when he could no longer see or hear her steps did he allow himself to express the concern that was eating him up inside. The return to the ranch was quicker than the journey there. Amber knew the path better now, and the urgency of not being discovered made her move quickly. She managed to enter through the back gate without being seen, and when Nancy found her in the kitchen the next morning, she pretended she was returning from the visit to the sick sister. "How is she?" asked Nancy, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she knew exactly where Amber had spent the night. Better. The medicine helped a lot. "I'm glad to hear that." Nancy approached, lowering her voice. "Amber girl, you need to be very careful. Last night I saw strange movement in the main house. Men arriving, meetings until late. Something is being planned." Amber's stomach tightened. "What kind of thing?" "I don't know for sure, but I heard fragments. They talked about clean-up operation, about solving problems once and for all, and they mentioned that Native American hunter." Nancy looked at her seriously. "If you have any connection with him, better cut it now. These people don't joke around." Amber nodded, trying to appear indifferent, but inside she was panicking. She had to find a way to warn Hunter, but how? She couldn't simply leave the ranch again without arousing suspicion, and there was no way to communicate with him at a distance. The answer came from an unexpected source. During lunch, Sanders announced that he needed volunteers for a special mission that would happen in the next few days. He didn't give details, just said it would be well paid and that he needed discreet and reliable people. Amber immediately volunteered, ignoring Nancy's warning looks. If there was an operation being planned against Hunter, she needed to be at the center of it to be able to interfere. "Interesting," said Sanders, studying her with calculating eyes. "Why do you want to participate?" "I need the extra money," she lied, "and I've already proven I can be trusted." Sanders nodded slowly. "All right. But remember, what happens on this mission stays between us. Those who talk too much don't live to tell the story." The next 2 days were of intense preparation. Amber was instructed about her role. She would be part of a group that would disguise themselves as environmental researchers to approach the Navajo village where Hunter lived. Once inside, they would give a signal to a second team that would be waiting in the desert. "What's the real objective?" she asked during one of the briefing meetings. "Capture the leader," said Richard, who had personally taken command of the operation. "We have information that he possesses documents that could harm our business. Once he's neutralized, we can negotiate with the other natives without interference. And if he doesn't cooperate?" Richard's smile was cold. "He will cooperate, or he'll discover that there are things worse than death." Amber felt nausea rise in her throat, but managed to maintain a neutral expression. It was clear that this wasn't just about capture. It was an operation of kidnapping and torture, possibly murder. She had to find a way to warn Hunter without compromising her position. The opportunity came on the night before the operation. The preparations were complete, and most of the men had gone to bed early to be rested for the mission. Amber waited until she was sure everyone was asleep, then sneaked out of the accommodation. She couldn't go to the waterfall. It was too far, and she wouldn't have time to return. But she remembered Hunter mentioning that there were Navajo lookouts scattered throughout the desert around the ranch. If she could find one of them, she moved cautiously along the edge of the property, keeping to the shadows, alert to any sound or movement. The desert was alive with night noises, and several times she was startled by shadows that seemed to move. It was when she was almost giving up that she heard a low whistle, almost imperceptible. She looked around, trying to locate the source of the sound, and saw a figure slowly emerge from behind a huge tree. It was a young man, clearly Native American, wearing dark clothes that camouflaged him perfectly in the darkness. "You're the woman who was with Hunter," he said in English, with a heavy accent but perfectly understandable. "I am." "How do you know?" "He told us, said that if you showed up around here, we were to take you to him." The man studied her with curiosity. "I'm Robert, Hunter's cousin. He's waiting for you." Amber felt relief and surprise in equal measure. "He's here. Close, come." She followed Robert along an almost invisible trail that snaked through the dense brush. They walked for about 20 minutes in total silence until they reached a small clearing where Hunter was waiting, along with 3 other warriors. "Amber," he said, standing up when he saw her. "I knew you would come." "How?" "Because I know you." He approached, briefly touching her face. "And because I felt something was wrong. There's been strange movement at the ranch for 2 days. That's why I'm here." Quickly, she told him everything about the planned operation, the details she had managed to discover, the plan to disguise themselves as researchers. Hunter listened in silence, but she could see the anger growing in his eyes. "Sons of bitches," he muttered when she finished. "They think we're stupid that we'll fall for such an obvious trap. What are you going to do?" Hunter exchanged looks with his men as if they were communicating silently. "We're going to give them exactly what they expect," he finally said. "A reception they won't forget." "Hunter, no, it's too dangerous. They have guns, equipment, and we have the desert." He held her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Amber, you've already done your part, more than that. You've saved many lives with this warning. Now you need to get out of the game." "I can't. If I don't show up tomorrow for the mission, they'll suspect. And if they discover that I warned you, then you'll have to be a very good actress." Hunter pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms. Listen carefully. When you arrive at the village, you'll be received by the elders. Everything will seem normal, but in reality it will be a performance. Our warriors will be positioned waiting for the signal from the second team. And when they attack, they won't have a chance. But you need to stay away from the conflict. The moment things heat up, you get down and stay still until it's all over. Understood? Amber nodded, but there was something else she needed to say. Something that had been growing inside her since the first kiss. Hunter, she began, but he interrupted her with an urgent, desperate kiss, as if it were the last. I know, he murmured against her lips. Me too. They didn't need to say the words. The feeling was there, palpable between them. A connection that had grown beyond physical attraction, beyond complicity in the struggle. It was love, pure and simple, born in the midst of chaos and violence. After tomorrow, he said, when all this is over, we'll talk. About us, about the future. About how two people from such different worlds can make this work. And if it doesn't work out, it will. The conviction in his voice reassured her. It has to. Robert approached, indicating it was time for her to return. Hunter kissed her once more. A kiss that tasted of promise and hope. Be careful tomorrow, he said. And remember, no matter what happens, you're too important to me. I don't want to lose you now that I've just found you. The return to the ranch was a silent and tense journey. Amber managed to enter unnoticed, but spent the rest of the night awake, mentally reviewing all the details of the plan. She had to be perfect in her performance. Any slip could cost not only her life, but the life of Hunter and many others. In the morning, when Sanders woke her up for the final preparations, she was ready. She put on the researcher clothes she was provided, checked the fake equipment, memorized her cover story. On the outside, she was a loyal employee following orders. On the inside, she was a woman in love, protecting the man she loved. The team. Left at noon, Amber, two other researchers, actually ranch thugs, a corrupt local guide, and Sanders supervising the operation. The second team, 10 armed men, would follow a different route and would be positioned in the desert waiting for the signal. During the journey, Amber had to listen to Sanders explaining in detail what they would do to Hunter when they captured him. Torture to extract information, emotional blackmail using the safety of the village, and finally elimination when he was no longer useful. Each word was like a stab, but she maintained a neutral expression, nodding at the appropriate moments. The Navajo village was in a natural clearing surrounded by huge trees, its traditional homes, hogans, forming a circle around a central area where an ever-burning fire burned. It was a place of impressive beauty, breathing millennial history and tradition. They were received by a group of elders, men and women of advanced age, who greeted them with the formal courtesy reserved for visitors. Amber looked discreetly for Hunter, but didn't see him anywhere. "Where is your leader?" asked Sanders, trying to appear casual. "Hunter is hunting," replied one of the elders in hesitant English. "Returns soon. You wait?" "Of course there's no rush," said Sanders, but Amber could see the tension in his shoulders. He made a discreet signal to one of the researchers, who moved away toward the desert, certainly to warn the second team that the target wasn't present. The minutes passed slowly, laden with almost tangible tension. Amber pretended to examine, glance and take notes, but was constantly alert, waiting for the moment when everything would explode. The natives continued their normal activities, women preparing food, children playing, men fixing equipment, but there was something in their movements that suggested preparation. It was when the sun began to set that everything happened. The man who had been sent to signal the second team came running back, clearly agitated. "Sanders," he called, "there's a problem. The support team, they're not responding on the radio." Sanders took his own communicator, trying to make contact. Only static. His face paled when reality began to become clear. "Sons of bitches," he muttered. "It's a trap." It was at that moment that Hunter appeared. He emerged from the desert like a shadow, followed by a dozen warriors who seemed to have sprouted from the very ground, They made no noise, uttered no threats. They were simply there, completely surrounding the area where the invaders were. "Good evening," said Hunter in perfectly articulated English, his voice calm as if he were greeting old friends. "I hope you've enjoyed our hospitality." Sanders tried to draw his weapon, but before he could complete the movement, a spear went whizzing inches from his head, embedding itself in a tree behind him. "I wouldn't do that," Hunter continued in the same conversational tone. "You're in sacred territory, surrounded by warriors who know every inch of this desert. Your chances of leaving here alive decrease drastically with each aggressive movement." "You can't do anything to us," said Sanders, trying to sound brave, but failing miserably. "We're American citizens. We have rights." "Rights?" Hunter's voice hardened for the first time. "What rights did you respect when you invaded our lands, when you contaminated our rivers, when you planned to kidnap and torture me?" Amber saw the exact moment when Sanders realized they had been betrayed. His eyes turned to her with murderous fury. "You!" he hissed. "Traitor bitch! It was you who—" He didn't finish the sentence. Hunter moved with feline speed, crossing the distance between them in seconds and grabbing Sanders by the neck. "The next word that comes out of your mouth directed at her will be the last you pronounce in this life," Hunter said, his voice low but loaded, with a threat that made everyone present swallow hard. Sanders nodded quickly, and Hunter released him. The other members of the ranch team remained motionless, clearly too terrified to try anything. "Now," said Hunter, returning to the calm tone, "we're going to have a civilized conversation about the future of relations between my people and your organization." Amber watched everything with a mixture of admiration and fear. This was Hunter in his element, the born leader who commanded absolute respect. There was power in each of his movements, authority in each word. And at the same time, when his eyes met hers for a brief moment, she saw there the tenderness that he reserved just for her. The conversation that followed was essentially an ultimatum. Hunter had captured the support team, all alive, but disarmed, and tied up in the desert. He had documents that proved the ranch's illegal activities. And now he had witnesses to the kidnapping attempt. "You have two options," he said. "First, you leave here now, go back to your boss, and tell him that the Native American lands are under permanent protection. Any new invasion will be treated as an act of war, and we won't be so gentle next time." "And the second option?" asked one of the fake researchers. "There is no second option," Hunter said simply. "That was just to give an air of choice." Sanders opened his mouth to protest, but a look from Hunter made him reconsider. Instead, he nodded reluctantly. "But the girl stays," Sanders said, pointing to Amber. "She's a ranch employee. She has a contract." "The girl makes her own choices," Hunter interrupted. He turned to Amber, and for a moment it was as if they were alone there. "What do you want to do?" It was the moment of truth. Amber looked at Sanders and the other ranchmen, then at Hunter and the Native American warriors. "It's our choice between two worlds, between the known and dangerous and the unknown but full of possibilities. I'm staying," she said, her voice firm and clear. "My place is here." Sanders laughed bitterly. "You don't know what you're getting into, girl. When Richard finds out about this—" "Richard will have bigger problems to worry about," said Hunter. He made a signal, and one of his warriors brought a backpack that Amber recognized as belonging to the support team. From inside it, Hunter took out documents, photographs, and communication equipment. "We found interesting material with your friends, evidence of corruption, bribery of public officials, murders. I think the Federal Bureau of Investigation will be very interested in this information." The threat was clear. Sanders and his men weren't just released prisoners, they were pawns in a much larger game that was just beginning. When the ranch group finally left, escorted to the edge of the Native American territory, Amber and Hunter were alone for the first time since everything had begun. They looked at each other for a long moment, both processing the magnitude of what had happened. "So," Hunter finally said, "there's no going back." "No," she replied, "and I don't want there to be." He approached, wrapping her in his arms, and she melted against his chest. There was safety there, but also the promise of challenges ahead. Two people from different worlds who had chosen to create a new world together. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, kissing the top of her head, "we really begin." But, even as they embraced under the stars that were beginning to appear in the southwest sky, both knew that the real fight was just beginning. Richard Mitchell wouldn't give up easily, and men like him had resources and connections that went far beyond what they had seen so far. In the main house of Golden Eagle Ranch, a telephone rang insistently. When it was finally answered, the boss' voice on the other end of the line was cold as ice. "Richard, I heard there was a problem with the operation." "A setback," Richard replied, trying to sound confident. "Nothing we can't resolve." "I hope so, because if this native continues to interfere in our business, we'll have to take more definitive measures. And this time we won't leave room for failures." The call ended, leaving Richard alone in the dark office, planning his revenge. The war was far from over. Amber's first days in the Navajo village were a complete immersion in a world she had never imagined. She woke up to the sound of birds and the soft murmur of the rivers that cut through the territory, very different from the industrial noise that had dominated her life at the ranch. The women of the tribe received her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. After all, she was the first non-native woman to choose to live among them of her own free will. Hunter had provided a space for her in one of the traditional constructions, a small but comfortable hogan, decorated with crafts that told millennial stories. She spent her days learning about medicinal plants from the elders, helping prepare traditional foods, and slowly gaining the community's trust through her genuine willingness to learn and contribute. But it was the nights she most looked forward to. When the day's work ended and the village quieted down, Hunter would come to find her. They would walk through the desert under the moonlight, talking about everything and nothing, getting to know each other in a way that went far beyond the physical attraction that had initially brought them together. "Tell me about your childhood," he asked during one of these night walks, as they sat by the edge of a stream that reflected the stars. Amber hesitated. Her childhood hadn't been easy. Poverty, early paternal abandonment, her mother's constant struggle to keep the family together. But there were also precious memories with Grandma June, the teachings about plants and healing, the stories about ancestors that she had never fully understood. "My grandmother used to say that I had blood of two lands," she told him, playing with the fresh water between her fingers. "I never understood what she meant until I met you." "June was wise," said Hunter, moving to sit closer to her. "My mother, Yvonne, spoke of her with great respect, said she could see beyond what the eyes showed." "And you? Can you see beyond?" Hunter looked at her with intensity, his green eyes shining in the twilight. "With you, yes. I see a brave woman who left everything behind for something she believes in. I see someone who understands that some fights are worth any sacrifice." "And what else do you see?" "I see the woman I love," he said simply, the words coming without hesitation or embarrassment. It was the first time he had said it openly, and Amber felt her heart race. She turned to face him completely, studying every line of the face that had become so precious to her. "I love you too," she whispered, and the words seemed to free something inside both of them. Hunter kissed her then, but this time it was different from previous kisses. There was a new urgency, a need that went beyond physical desire. It was as if, by finally declaring their feelings, they had torn down the last barrier between them. When they separated, both were breathless. Hunter rested his forehead on hers, closing his eyes as if he were recording that moment in his memory. "Amber," he murmured, "there are things about me you need to know, about my past, about why I became who I am." "I'm listening." He took a deep breath as if he were preparing to reveal secrets kept for a long time. "When my mother was killed, I was 15. I saw everything happen, but couldn't do anything to prevent it. The miners invaded our native village during the night, killed several warriors, raped the women. My mother tried to protect other children, and for that, she was executed in front of all of us." Amber felt tears spring to her eyes, but didn't interrupt. "For years I lived only to get revenge. I learned to fight, to track, to be invisible in the desert. I killed the men who murdered my mother one by one. I thought that would give me peace, but it only brought more emptiness." He opened his eyes, looking directly at her. It was only when I became the leader of my own community, when I began to protect others instead of just seeking revenge, that I found a real purpose. And now? Now you're here, and for the first time since my mother's death, I feel that I have something to lose besides my own life. He touched her face gently. That scares me more than any enemy. Why? Because men like Richard Mitchell know how to use love against us. If they discover how much you mean to me, Amber covered his hand with hers, then we have to be smarter than them, stronger. It's not that simple. Richard has powerful connections, resources that go far beyond what we've seen so far. And now he has a personal reason to hate me. As if fate itself were listening to their conversation, the sound of engines approaching echoed through the desert. Hunter stood up immediately, all his warrior instincts on maximum alert. Helicopters, he said, helping Amber to her feet. Many. This is not good. They ran back to the village, where there was already movement of people organizing in response to the approaching sound. The warriors were grabbing their weapons, the women and children were heading to shelters prepared for emergencies, and the elders were gathering in a quick council. How many? Hunter asked Robert, who was coordinating the response. At least 3 helicopters, possibly 4. They're coming from the south, from the direction of the ranch. Robert paused, his expression somber. Hunter, there's something else. Our lookouts at the border reported movement of ground troops as well. Armed men, heavy equipment. This is not a simple operation. Amber felt her blood freeze. Are they going to attack the village? No, said Hunter, but there was tension in his voice. At least not directly. It would be a massacre that would attract international attention, but they might be planning something worse. The helicopters passed over the village without landing, making circles like predators studying their prey. From the ground, it was possible to see armed men in the aircraft, cameras being used to map the territory. It was clearly a reconnaissance operation. They're studying us, murmured Hunter, looking for weak points, escape routes, and strategic positions. When the helicopters finally moved away, the village remained on alert. Hunter called an emergency meeting with all the tribe leaders, including the elders and the main warriors. They're planning something big, he said, his voice echoing in the central building where everyone gathered. This is no longer about mining or land, it's personal. What do you suggest, asked one of the elders, that we prepare for war, a war different from anything we've faced before? During the next 3 days, the village was transformed into a fortress. Warriors from other Navajo communities arrived to reinforce the defenses, bringing modern weapons in addition to traditional ones. Escape routes were established, supplies were hidden in safe locations, and a communication system with the outside. World was set up. Amber participated in the preparations, but there was something that deeply bothered her. One night, when she couldn't sleep, she decided to share her concerns with Hunter. They won't attack directly, she said, as they walked around the perimeter of the village. Richard is too smart for that. He knows that a direct attack would be a public relations disaster. Then what do you think he's planning? Something that puts me at the center. He knows that you love me, and he'll use that. Amber stopped walking, turning to face Hunter. He's going to try to capture me. I won't let that happen. You may not have a choice. If they set the right trap, if they use me as bait. Amber, don't talk like that. Listen, Hunter. Need to tell you something I discovered in the last few days here in the village. She took a deep breath, preparing to reveal something she had discovered talking with the elders. My grandmother June wasn't just friends with your mother. They were more than that. They were part of a network of healers who protected ancestral secrets. Hunter looked at her with renewed interest. What kind of secrets? Locations of sacred sites, knowledge about rare medicinal plants, and records of crimes against native peoples that were never prosecuted. Amber took from her pocket a small notebook she had found among her belongings. I found this when I was organizing my things. It's my grandmother's, and it has information that could destroy not only Richard, but the entire corruption network behind him. Hunter took the notebook, leafing through the pages covered with June's careful handwriting. There were names, dates, detailed descriptions of crimes, and references to documents hidden in specific locations. "My God," he murmured, "this is explosive. If this information reaches the right authorities—" "Exactly. And that's why they can't capture me. It's not just about separating us, it's about ensuring that these secrets die with me." It was at that moment that they heard the sound of engines approaching again. But this time they weren't helicopters. They were ground. Vehicles, many of them, coming down the main trail that led to the village. "Alert!" shouted Robert from his lookout post. "Military convoy approaching, at least 10 vehicles." The village instantly went into emergency mode. Warriors ran to their positions, families headed to the shelters, and Hunter prepared for what seemed to be the final confrontation. But when the convoy stopped at the entrance to the village, it wasn't soldiers who got out of the vehicles. It was the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by representatives of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and even some journalists. A man in uniform approached, his hands visibly away from any weapon. "I'm Federal Marshal Mark Simpson. We're here on an official mission, investigating allegations of environmental crimes and violations of Native American rights in the region." Hunter stepped forward, remaining alert but receptive. "Welcome. I'm Hunter Blackhawk, leader of this community." "Mr. Blackhawk, we've received information that there's a criminal operation in progress against your village. We've come to offer protection and investigate the allegations." Amber and Hunter exchanged looks. Someone had alerted the authorities, but who? The answer came when a familiar figure emerged from one of the vehicles. It was Nancy, the ranch cook, accompanied by other employees whom Amber recognized. "Nancy," Amber said, approaching in disbelief, "what are you doing here?" "Saving your life, girl," Nancy replied with a tired smile. "You weren't the only one who grew up hearing stories from your grandmother. June helped my family many years ago, and I never forgot the debt." "I don't understand. After you left the ranch that night, things got ugly. Richard was planning something terrible, not just against you, but against the entire village. He was going to fabricate a story about terrorist attacks, justify a military operation to pacify the region." Nancy pointed to the other employees. "We decided it was time to stop being silent accomplices." Marshal Simpson approached Hunter. "Mr. Blackhawk, these citizens have brought us evidence of a conspiracy to commit genocide. We'll need your testimony and any documentation you may have about illegal activities in the region." That's when Amber realized they had a unique opportunity. She turned to Hunter, urgently whispering, "My grandmother's notebook. It's our chance to expose everything." Hunter nodded, understanding immediately. "Marshal, we have information that may interest you, but you'll need special protection for the witnesses." "Of course, what is it about?" "A conspiracy that involves decades of crimes against native peoples, government corruption, and murders to cover up evidence." Hunter paused, looking at Amber. "And we have documentation to prove everything." The following hours were a silent revolution. Amber handed June's notebook to the authorities, who were impressed with the level of detail of the information. Nancy and the other ranch employees gave detailed testimonies about the illegal operations they had witnessed. Hunter provided evidence of the territorial invasions and the plans to attack the village. But the final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Robert approached Hunter with a strange expression on his face. "Cousin," he said, "there's someone here who wants to talk to you. Says it's urgent." The person in question was an older man, clearly Native American but wearing Western clothes. There was something familiar about his features that made Amber feel uneasy. "Hunter Blackhawk?" the man asked, approaching cautiously. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is John Taylor. I'm June Taylor's brother and Amber's grandfather." He looked directly at Amber, who felt the world spin around her. "Child, I've been looking for you for a long time." Amber couldn't speak. The grandfather she had never known, who had disappeared from the family's life when she was a baby, was there in front of her. "How?" she managed to murmur. "June sent me letters for years telling me about you, about your healing gifts, about the dreams you had." John moved closer, his eyes full of contained emotion. "When she died, I lost contact with the family. I spent years searching, and when I heard you were here with Hunter—" "You knew them?" Hunter asked, indicating himself and his mother. I knew Yvonne since childhood. Our families were close before the colonists' invasion separated our peoples. John paused, studying the two young people. There are things you need to know. About why your mothers were so close, about why your destinies are intertwined. Marshal Simpson approached, clearly impatient. Excuse me for interrupting, but we have an urgent situation. Our men reported movement at the Mitchell Ranch. It looks like they're destroying evidence and preparing to flee. We can't let that happen, Hunter said immediately. I agree, but we need to do this within the law. Mr. Blackhawk, would you be willing to accompany us as guides? You know the region better than anyone. Of course, Hunter replied, but looked at Amber with concern. But Amber stays here, protected. No, she said firmly. I'm going with you. I know the ranch from the inside. I can help. It's too dangerous. Hunter, my whole life has been dangerous, but this time I'm fighting for something worth it. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. We're in this together, remember? Till the end. John Taylor approached both of them. If you're going to do this, you'll need all the help you can get. And there's something I need to give you before it's too late. He took from his pocket a small amulet made of stone and natural fibers, decorated with symbols that seemed to dance in the firelight. This belonged to my sister June, and before her to our grandmother and to her grandmother. It's a symbol of protection, but also of connection with our ancestors. He placed the amulet around Amber's neck. June made me promise that one day I would give this to you when the time came to face your destiny. Amber touched the amulet, feeling a strange sensation of completeness, as if a missing piece had finally fit into place. And for you, John said, turning to Hunter, I have something that your mother asked me to keep. It was a similar necklace, but made of different materials, stones that shone with their own light and fibers that seemed almost metallic. Yvonne gave me this shortly, before she died. She said that one day her son would find the right person to share his destiny with, and that when that happened, you would need to be protected by the spirits of both lineages. When Hunter put on the necklace, Amber felt a strange energy fill the air around them. It was as if an invisible current connected them, stronger than any physical bond. Now you are truly united, said John with satisfaction. Not just by love, but by ancestral destiny. Marshal Simpson checked his watch. People, we need to move. We have a very small window of opportunity. The operation that followed was meticulously planned. The FBI would surround the ranch via the main routes, while Hunter and his warriors would use trails known only to them to position themselves strategically. Amber would accompany the main team, using her knowledge of the internal layout of the property to guide the search for evidence. When they left at dawn, under a starry sky that promised the dawn of a new day, Amber and Hunter walked side by side, their fingers intertwined, the amulets shining softly against their skin. Whatever we find there, Hunter said softly, we face together. Together, she agreed. And for the first time since that whole journey had begun, she felt that she really had a family, a place where she belonged, and a love that was worth any fight. But as they approached the ranch, neither of them could imagine that Richard Mitchell had prepared one last surprise, one that would test not only their courage and determination, but the very strength of the ancestral bonds that now united them. The ranch was strangely silent when they arrived. Too silent. The lights were off, there was no movement of people or vehicles, and even the guard dogs seemed to have disappeared. This isn't right, murmured Amber, a sense of danger making her hair stand on end. Marshal Simpson signaled for his team to take position. They may have fled during the night, he said, but there was tension in his voice. That's when they heard the first shot. And then, as if hell had opened up on Earth, the ranch exploded in violence. Hidden shooters opened fire from various positions, transforming the arrest operation into a war zone. It's a trap, shouted Hunter, pulling Amber to the shelter of one of the vehicles. They knew we were coming. As shots echoed through the dawn and tracers cut through the air around them, Amber realized that the final battle had begun. And this time, it wouldn't be just about land or power, it would be about survival. The shootout lasted only 10 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity. When silence finally returned to reign over the ranch, 3 federal agents were injured, 2 of Richard's shooters were dead, and the rest had fled into the desert. But most importantly, they hadn't found either Richard or his main henchman. "They knew we were coming," said Marshal Simpson, examining the empty ranch while doctors attended to the wounded. "Someone warned them." Hunter helped Amber get up from behind the vehicle where they had taken shelter. She was trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Her eyes scanned the property that had been her prison for so many weeks, now transformed into a battlefield. "It doesn't make sense," she murmured, walking toward the main house. "If they knew you were coming, why not simply flee? Why set up an ambush?" "Because they wanted something," said Hunter, following her. "Or someone." The answer came when they found the first note. It was pinned to the door of the main house. Written in large letters, "Hunter Blackhawk. If you want to see your woman alive again, come alone to the White Rocks at sunrise. Bring the notebook." Amber felt her blood freeze. "But I'm here, how can they have—" The understanding came like a punch to the stomach. Nancy, the cook who had helped them, who had brought the FBI, who knew all the details of their plans. "Son of a bitch," Hunter muttered, crumpling the paper in his fists. "She was a double agent from the beginning." "No," said Amber, shaking her head. "Nancy really helped me. She did exactly what Richard wanted her to do. Gained your trust, found out everything about the notebook, about our plans, about our relationship." Hunter began to pace back and forth, his anger growing with each second. "And now she's in his hands, being used as bait." Marshal Simpson approached, having overheard the conversation. "What White Rocks?" "It's a sacred place for our people," explained Hunter. "It's about 15 miles from here, in an area of difficult access. If he chose that place, it's because he wants to end this where it all began. Then we'll send a team." "No," Hunter's voice was firm. "He said to go alone. If I show up with police, he'll kill Nancy immediately." "Hunter, you can't go alone," Amber protested. "It's obviously a trap." "Of course it is, but we don't have a choice." That's when John Taylor approached the group. Amber's grandfather had remained silent during the confrontation, but his expression now was one of iron determination. "You won't go alone," he said to Hunter, "and you won't hand over the notebook." "What do you mean?" John smiled, a smile that much reminded June's when she was about to reveal one of her secrets. "Because the notebook you have isn't the only one." June was too smart to put all the information in one place. He took from his pocket another notebook, this one even older and more worn than the first. "This one has the really important information. Exact locations of hidden documents, names of people still alive involved in the conspiracy, evidence that can bring down not just Richard, but the entire network behind him." "And what do you suggest?" asked Marshal Simpson. "That we set our own trap." The plan that followed was risky but ingenious. Hunter would go to the White Rocks as requested, but not alone. Navajo warriors would be positioned strategically in the desert around. Amber would take the fake notebook, but would remain at a safe distance with the FBI. And John Taylor? John would have his own role to play. "There's something you need to know," he said as they prepared to leave. "Richard Mitchell isn't just a common criminal. He has connections with very powerful people, people who prefer to solve problems by making them disappear permanently." "What kind of people?" "The kind that killed Yvonne, Hunter's mother. The kind that has been trying to silence our family for decades." John looked directly at Amber. "Your grandmother didn't die of natural causes, child. She was poisoned because she knew too much." The shock of the revelation made Amber stagger. Hunter held her, his own anger intensifying. "Why was this never told?" "Because we didn't have proof and because we wanted to protect you." John touched the amulet on Amber's neck. "But now you're strong enough to know the truth and to fight for it." When the sun began to rise, painting the sky of the American Southwest in shades of gold and red, the group positioned itself for the final confrontation. Hunter went alone down the trail that led to the White Rocks, carrying the fake notebook, and an iron determination to end this once and for all. The White Rocks were a unique rock formation, a perfect circle of quartz rocks that shone like diamonds in the morning light. It was a place of ancestral power, where the Navajo performed their most sacred rituals for countless generations. Richard was waiting in the center of the circle, accompanied by 5 armed men. Nancy was tied to one of the rocks, clearly injured, but alive. Her eyes met Hunter's with an expression of apology and despair. "Punctual as always," said Richard, his voice echoing among the rocks. "Did you bring what I asked for?" Hunter raised the notebook. "Release her first." "It doesn't work like that. First the notebook, then the woman." "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Richard laughed, a harsh sound that contrasted with the serene beauty of the place. "You don't. But this is your only chance to save her." Hunter approached slowly, each step calculated. He knew his warriors were positioned in the desert around, but he also knew that Richard had enough men to cause a lot of damage before being neutralized. "You know what irritates me most about you, native?" said Richard as Hunter approached. "It's that arrogance, that certainty that your cause is just, that you're on the right side of history. And am I not? History is written by the winners, and today you lose." That's when everything exploded. Into motion. Richard's men raised their weapons, but before they could shoot, silent arrows flew from the desert, hitting 3 of them with deadly precision. The Navajo warriors emerged from among the rocks like shadows, moving with perfect speed and coordination. But Richard still had one card up his sleeve. He pulled a pistol and pointed it directly at Nancy's head. "One move and she dies," he shouted. Hunter stopped immediately. "Richard, this won't solve anything. Even if you kill me, even if you destroy the notebook, the FBI already has enough evidence to—" "The FBI isn't my problem," Richard interrupted him. "My problem is you. You and that damn Taylor family that has been messing with my business for decades." "What family?" "You really don't know, do you? Your precious Amber, her grandmother, that whole lineage of witches who stick their noses where they aren't called." Richard pressed the gun against Nancy's head. "Well, today I end this once and for all." The shot echoed through the white rocks like thunder. But it wasn't Nancy who fell. It was Richard, a Navajo arrow embedded in his chest, shot by Robert, from an impossible position in the top of a nearby tree. The confrontation that followed was quick and brutal. Richard's remaining men tried to resist, but they were in hostile territory, surrounded by warriors who knew every inch of that desert. In a few minutes it was all over. Hunter ran to free Nancy, who collapsed in his arms, crying. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. He had my daughter. He said he would kill her if I didn't cooperate." "It's okay," Hunter said, helping her to stand. "Where is she?" "In a hideout in the city. I have the address." That's when they heard footsteps approaching. Amber appeared running down the trail, followed by Marshal Simpson and several federal agents. When she saw Hunter unharmed, she threw herself into his arms with such force that it almost knocked them over. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered against his chest. "Never," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "You'll never lose me." But the battle wasn't completely over yet. While the police arrested the survivors and administered first aid, John Taylor approached Richard's body. He knelt beside the dead man, searching his pockets until he found what he was looking for, a cell phone. "His connections," John explained when the others approached. "All the contacts, all the evidence of corruption, it's all here." Marshal. Simpson took the phone, his eyes widening when he saw the content. "My God, this is going to bring down half the political elite of the country." "That was the objective," said John simply. "Delayed justice, but finally arriving." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Nancy's daughter was rescued safely. The evidence found in Richard's phone led to the arrest of dozens of corrupt politicians and businessmen, and the ranch was officially closed and converted into an area of environmental protection. Amber and Hunter testified in several hearings, helping to build the cases against the criminals. But what marked them most was the purification ceremony held at the White Rocks a week after the confrontation. It was a traditional Navajo ritual to cleanse a sacred place that had been desecrated by violence. The entire tribe participated, along with John Taylor and even some of the federal agents who had become allies. Today, this place is reborn said the tribe's oldest medicine man, as sacred herbs burned in the center of the circle of stones. Violence is purified, ancestral spirits are honored, and two hearts unite under the blessing of the elders. That's when Hunter knelt before Amber, in front of the entire community. "Amber Taylor," he said, his voice clear and firm, "from the first moment I saw you, I knew my life had changed forever. You brought light to my darkness, purpose to my anger, and love where before there was only emptiness." Amber felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I want to spend the rest of my life by your side," Hunter continued, "protecting our land, our people, our love. Will you be my wife? Will you start a family with me? Will you face all the challenges that the future brings together?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, her voice broken with emotion. "Yes, to everything." The kiss that followed was witnessed by the entire tribe, by John Taylor, who cried proudly, by Nancy, who smiled through her own tears, and by the very spirits of the desert that seemed to approve of the union. The wedding ceremony took place 3 months later, mixing Navajo traditions with elements that honored Amber's heritage. She wore a simple white dress decorated with Native American patterns, while Hunter was dressed in the traditional colors of a tribal leader. John Taylor conducted part of the ceremony, speaking about the importance of family lineages and how that union represented the healing of ancestral wounds. Marshall Simpson, who had become a close friend, was one of the official witnesses. "You aren't just getting married," he said during the speech. "You're proving that it's possible to build bridges between different worlds, that love can overcome any obstacle when it's based on mutual respect and shared values." The celebration lasted 3 days, with music, dance, traditional food, and stories told around bonfires that burned all night. People from various Native American tribes came to celebrate, along with some of the new allies they had won during the fight. But for Amber and Hunter, the most precious moment was when they finally were alone in their new home, a hogan built especially for them, decorated with wedding gifts from the entire community. "So," said Hunter, pulling her close, "in the soft candlelight, how does it feel being the wife of a Native American leader?" "Like I'm finally home," she replied, touching his face gently. "Like all the pain, all the struggle was worth it to get to this moment." "And what do you want for our future?" Amber smiled, placing her hand on her still flat belly. "Well, to start with, I think we're going to need a crib in a few months." The shock and joy that passed over Hunter's face were indescribable. He picked her up, spinning with her around the room while both laughed and cried at the same time. "When?" he asked, finally putting her back on the floor. 2 months, I think. It's still early, but the signs are all there." "A baby," he murmured, amazed. "Our baby." "A new generation," she agreed. "A child who will grow up knowing both cultures, who will be a bridge between worlds." They kissed then, a long and deep kiss that sealed not only their love but their promise to build a better future for the generations to come. 6 months later, Amber gave birth to a girl with green eyes like her father's and dark hair like her mother's. They named her June Yvonne Blackhawk Taylor, honoring the grandmothers who had made that moment possible. The child's baptism was conducted simultaneously in the Navajo traditions and in the blessings that Amber had learned from her grandmother. John Taylor, now a proud grandfather, conducted part of the ceremony, while the tribe's medicine men blessed the girl with ancestral protections. "This child," said the oldest medicine man, holding June in his arms as she slept peacefully, "carries in herself the best of 2 worlds. She will be a warrior like her father, a healer like her mother, and a bridge between cultures like her very existence." Amber and Hunter looked at each other, knowing that those words were more than a blessing, they were a prophecy. 2 years later, when June was already walking and speaking her first words in English and Navajo, they received an unexpected visit. Marshall Simpson arrived at the village accompanied by an elegant woman who introduced herself as Dr. Ana Beatriz Mendez, a lawyer specializing in Native American rights. "We have a proposal for you," she said during dinner at Amber and Hunter's home. "The Justice Department is creating a new division specialized in crimes against Native peoples. We need people who understand both the American legal system and traditional cultures, people who can be true bridges. Hunter and Amber exchanged looks. It was an opportunity to expand their fight, to protect not only their own community, but all Native American communities in the country. Would it be based in Washington, D.C.? Asked Amber. Primarily, but with a lot of field work. You would maintain your base here in the village, but would travel throughout the country investigating cases, providing consultation, helping communities at risk. And our daughter. She would grow up knowing the entire United States, learning from different peoples, truly becoming a citizen of multiple cultures. They asked for time to think, but deep down they already knew what the answer would be. That was the natural continuation of everything they had fought for. 3 months later, the Black Hawk Taylor family moved to a house in Washington, D.C., while also maintaining their residence in the village. Hunter became a specialized consultant on Native American territorial issues, while Amber used her knowledge of traditional medicine to work on public health projects adapted to the realities of Native communities. June grew up speaking 4 languages: English, Navajo, Spanish, and French, and from an early age showed signs of the healing gifts of her maternal family and the natural leadership of her paternal family. When she turned 5, in a special ceremony at the White Rocks, she received her own protective amulets, sacred stones that had belonged to her great-grandmothers June and Yvonne, now passed to a new generation. "She will do great things," said John Taylor, watching his granddaughter play with other children from the village. "I can see the future in her eyes." "What kind of future?" asked Amber. "A future where there will no longer be divisions between native and non-native, where people will simply be Americans, proud of all their heritages." 10 years passed. Hunter and Amber became national references in the defense of Native American rights, having participated in the creation of new protection laws and the resolution of dozens of territorial conflicts. Their love story had become legend, told and retold in communities throughout the country, as proof that true love can overcome any obstacle. June, now 15, was a confident and determined young woman who spoke with equal fluency about ancestral rituals and constitutional rights. At school in Washington, D.C., she was known as a natural leader who defended her colleagues against discrimination and bullying. In the village, she was respected as a wise young woman who already showed signs of becoming a powerful healer. It was during a visit to the village to celebrate her parents' wedding anniversary that June made a discovery that would change everything. Once again, she was helping John Taylor organize old documents when she found a letter that had never been opened, addressed to her great-grandmother June and dated just a week before the healer's death. "Grandpa," she called, showing the letter. "What is this?" John took the envelope with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the handwriting. "It's from Yvonne Blackhawk, your father's mother. She managed to send this to June shortly before she died, but it arrived too late." "Can we open it?" "I think it's time." The letter contained revelations that left the entire family in shock. Yvonne had discovered not only the identity of the men who were planning to kill her, but also the location of an ancestral treasure. Not gold or precious stones, but medical and spiritual knowledge accumulated by generations of healers, hidden in sacred caves that no one else knew how to find. "There's a map," said John, studying the drawings on the back of the letter, "and specific instructions. She wanted this knowledge to be preserved for future generations." "We have to find this place," said June, with the characteristic determination of her family. "It's dangerous," warned Hunter, "if there are still people interested in keeping these secrets buried." "Then it's even more important that we find them first," replied Amber, touching the amulet she never took off her neck. "It's our responsibility to past and future generations." The expedition to find the sacred caves became a family project. John Taylor, even at 80, insisted on participating as a guide. Hunter brought a group of trusted warriors. Amber carried her most advanced healing equipment. And June carried the ancestral intuition that allowed her to decipher symbols and signs that had remained hidden for decades. When they finally found the entrance to the caves, hidden behind a waterfall in the most remote region of the Navajo territory, they all knew they were facing something extraordinary. The walls were covered with paintings that told the story of 1,000 years of Native American wisdom. There were diagrams of medicinal plants, healing recipes, protection rituals, and astronomical knowledge that rivaled modern scientific discoveries. "My God," murmured Amber, examining the drawings with a flashlight. "This is an invaluable anthropological treasure." "It's more than that," said June, touching one of the paintings with reverence. "It's our heritage, our responsibility." They spent 3 days cataloging and photographing everything, creating a complete digital archive of the ancestral knowledge. But the most important discovery came on the last day, when June found a secret chamber in the back of the cave. There, perfectly preserved, were Yvonne Blackhawk's personal belongings, her medicine woman's necklace, her healing instruments, and a final diary she had written in the last days of her life. "For my son Hunter," read the first page, "and for the woman he will one day love, and for the children they will have, and for all the generations that will come after. May this knowledge protect and guide them in building a better world." Tears flowed freely down Hunter's face as he read his mother's final words. Words of love, of hope, of faith in the future that she would not live to see, but that she had helped make possible. "She knew," he murmured. "Somehow she knew all this was going to happen." "Mothers always know," said Amber, embracing him, "just as we know that our daughter will continue this journey." "And what journey will that be?" asked June. "The one you choose," replied John Taylor, observing his great-granddaughter with pride. "But whatever it is, you won't be alone. You'll have the love of your family, the wisdom of your ancestors, and the strength that comes from knowing who you are and where you came from." When they returned from the expedition, June had made a decision. She wanted to study medicine, but not conventional medicine. She wanted to create a new approach that combined ancestral knowledge with modern science, healing not just bodies, but souls and entire communities. "It's an ambitious dream," said Amber when her daughter told her of her plans. "It's a necessary dream," June replied. "The world is changing, Mum. Our generation needs to find ways to preserve what is ancient and sacred, but also to embrace what is new and necessary." Hunter smiled, recognizing in those words the same fire that had driven his own journey. "Then that's what we'll do. Together, as always." And so, as the sun set over the American Southwest, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, the Blackhawk-Taylor family prepared for the next chapter of their journey. A journey that had begun with 2 wounded souls meeting amid violence and chaos, and that now extended to the stars, carrying with it the promise of a future where love, justice, and ancestral wisdom could finally coexist in harmony. Amber and Hunter's love had become more than a personal story. It had transformed into a legacy, living proof that even in the darkest moments, when everything seems lost, it's still possible to find the light, and that this light once lit can illuminate the path for entire generations. In the distance, the drums of the village echoed through the desert, celebrating not just the union of 2 people, but the promise of a better future for all, a future built on love, courage, and the unbreakable determination to never give up fighting for what is right. And at the White Rocks, where it had all begun, where their hearts had met for the first time, where they had sworn eternal love, a new moon was rising in the starry sky of the American Southwest, silently witnessing that some love stories are greater than the people who live them. They are stories that change the world,